So you guys wanted me to do this, so here you go. This is the lore of Doki Doki Literature Club. The main protagonist is invited by his cheerful childhood friend, Sayori, to join their high school's literature club as a remedy for his insular nature. He reluctantly agrees to their proposal, and he meets other members of the club, Natsuki, Yuri, and the club president, Monika. After each day passes in the literature club, the club members are prompted to compose a poem, which they share with other members the following day. Eventually, as the club prepares for the school's upcoming cultural festival, in which the club members intend to share their poems with a wider audience, Sayori reveals to the protagonist that she suffers from depression. The protagonist assists either Yuri or Natsuki with their tasks, with each attempting to kiss the protagonist before he encounters Sayori again. The protagonist can either confess to console Sayori and friendzone her in this moment. Regardless, the following day, Monika passively shows the protagonist an uncharacteristically morbid poem by Sayori that insistently orders somebody to get out of her head. Realizing that something has happened to her, the protagonist rushes to Sayori's home, where she's shocked to discover that she has just hanged herself, and the game abruptly ends. The player is sent to the main menu, with all previous save files corrupted and eventually deleted. The narrator repeats upon the start of a new game, but Sayori is glaringly absent, and the characters do not remember her existence. Monika introduces the protagonist to the club in lieu of Sayori. Events proceed similarly to the original playthrough, but some text is rendered illegible. The character sprites appear corrupted from time to time, and what appear to be computer glitches or bugs become commonplace. Aside from the game's frequent distortions, it is revealed both dialogue and unlockable special poems that Natsuki is malnourished and being abused by her father, and the normally common Sayori becomes unstable, possessive, and prone to self-harm. When the planning stage for the cultural festival is reached, a hating quarrel who will help over the protagonist when the festival breaks out. After the player is forced to choose Monika, Yuri ejects her and Natsuki from the room, and privately confesses her love for the protagonist. Whether or not that protagonist accepts Yuri's concession, she commits suicide by stabbing herself, in which the protagonist is forced to stay and watch her corpse slowly decompose over the course of the weekend as a result of a broken game script. Natsuki returns upon the script resetting, vomits at the sight of Yuri's body, and flees the scene. Monika appears and apologizes to the protagonist for the boring weekend that he spent, compensating by deleting Yuri and Natsuki's character files from existence and restarting the game. The protagonist is placed in what remains of the literature club classroom with Monika seated across from him. Monika reveals that she is a self-aware video game character, having acquired the ability to manipulate the game's code after gaining sentience. Distraught at the fact that she is not a romance option, but merely a supporting bystander, she used her ability to amplify the negative traits of her clubmates in a bid to make them unlikable, and to prevent her concessions of love to the protagonist, only for them to become more determined. She then confesses her own love not to the protagonist, but to the player, due to them being real and autonomous rather than programmed. Monika will sit and talk to the player indefinitely about various topics, until the player manually enters the game's directory and deletes just Monika's character file. Monika initially fades away and lashes out at the player as she disappears, but eventually forgives them and remorsefully repents by restoring the game and the characters, including herself. So that was the Doki Doki Literature Club lore, and I hope you enjoyed.